Hello and welcome to the walk-off, everybody. I'm Scott Belford. We have a very special episode for you today. Our Friday episode is the collab no one asked for, but we do not care. We're doing it anyways. We have the boys from Blue Jays today here. Before we get into introductions and start talking some Toronto Blue Jays, just a reminder, if you are new to the channel here, please hit that subscribe button. Goes a long way to supporting the channel. And that thumbs up, give us a like, help out the show on that. So happy to be joined by Adam Peddle and Nick Paleolog.
So close.
It was,
so
yeah,
close.
it was so close.
Listen,
man. It
he
was so close.
gave me such a tutorial beforehand, and I had it. I even said this. You listen. Anyone listening to this who watches the walk-off is well aware when it comes to pronouncing names, I'm going to be the one to screw it up, and they celebrate it. So really,
Listen, us too,
everyone
man.
in the
Like,
comment
Sasaki,
section's a
we
favor.
couldn't get.
I was just gonna say, like, how do you pronounce Roki's last name? Because I'm still getting it wrong.
Sasaki.
Sasaki.
Yeah.
It was
Sasaki.
hammered into me like Sasaki, like, when we were on our feet.
Well, I like that you have proved that I also cannot pronounce Japanese.
Making you feel worse,
Yeah.
We're all in the same boat, man. But we're excited to be
Yeah.
here with you on this Friday.
Man, we went for beers on Wednesday right before the Pete Alonso news broke. And so we are going to dive into the Alonso stuff. We got lots to talk about here today, everybody. We're going to talk how the Blue Jays seem to constantly use for leverage. And is this thing that is happening just to Toronto, or is if leverage just part of negotiations in any sport? We'll talk it. Where does Toronto pivot from here? We'll get into that. We'll talk the Ippei saga, which has finally come to an end. He is headed to jail. And then we'll touch on gambling and umpire Pat Hobels and just how prevalent that has become in sport in general. So we were grabbing beers together on Wednesday. Pete Alonso, still a free agent at the time. And I remember both of you were like, he's going back to the Mets. There's no way. And I was the only one at the table of the three of us that was like, you know what? Maybe he won't. Maybe he's pissed that they haven't given him what he wants. And once they finally realize that they're not going to match whatever offers are out there, he's going to angrily take the Blue Jays offer. And like an hour after we went home, you guys,
Yeah, literally.
You kind of jinxed it, man.
I did
Yeah,
kinda
it's all your
jinx it.
fault.
I did kind of jinx it. So let's start with you, Nick. I am curious as to what you thought of the deal, because it is an intriguing deal. Obviously, $54 million is nothing to sneeze at, but for a guy of Pete Alonso's ilk, you look at his numbers. I know you've brought up on your podcast many times that his lowest home run total has been 34 since his career has started. It's an incredibly impressive power bat. He does have the opt-out after 1 year, so $30 million. It is front-loaded. This is not what Boras and Pete Alonso was going for.
Not even remotely close, man. And I guess maybe I'm a Pete Alonso stan. I think the guy's great, and I did really want him on the Toronto Blue Jays. Like Adam can attest, like at the beginning of free agency, right? Even when Juan Soto was still on the board, I said, okay, obviously Juan Soto's the number one, by a wide margin. But for me, the number two target that I would love to see in a Blue Jays uniform is Pete Alonso, because he is just so consistent and provides has such a stable floor of power that you don't see from a lot of guys at the MLB level. Now, I understand, and I'm going to quote Shai Davidi in this a little bit. We had him on our show a little while ago, and he was saying it's like, okay, well, you got to look at this from a front office business standpoint, whereas for a guy like Pete Alonso, a lot of the front offices feel like they're paying for the decline, and they're not actually going to get the prime. And we were talking about that in relation to Vladimir Guerrero Jr., because it's like, well, if he gets extended, you theoretically should be paying for the prime and, not the fall off. But for Pete Alonso's case, being 30, a lot of teams were looking at it and thinking, not a great defender. Maybe those power numbers are going to start to dip. The fact that number got so low to $54 million, though, that's that's one of those ones where I said it to Adam immediately, and it feels like you say this every time, right? It feels like you get an update from this guy signs on this team, and being a fan of a team, you always feel this way. But this time I was like 100%. Nobody could have beat that.
Yeah. Well, the way I look at it is, I think Pete Alonso kind of did this to himself. I mean, it was so obvious out there that Pete Alonso was gonna go back to the Mets. He wanted to be a New York Met, and
Yeah.
if I'm Steve Cohen, and I'm the Mets front office, I hear that I'm like, okay, well, we can make whatever offer we want. We can make a very team friendly offer here. We can include opt-outs after 1 year, 2 year, give you only committed to $54 million, and that's it. And we can do whatever we want. And clearly, yeah, like no other team was willing to beat that offer, but it had to be a much higher offer because clearly Pete Alonso didn't want to go out of the Queens. He wanted to stay in New York. So whatever offer that was, it had to be significantly way higher than we could ever imagine. So they just used that to their own advantage. They had leverage there.
Adam, that is such an astute point because the truth is, man, Pete showed his cards.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk leverage in a second here. Like,
Yeah.
that's the thing. When you're going into negotiations and the other side you're negotiating with already knows what you want, what you're prepared to do, and the fact that, like, there is a area where they can wedge and, like, really, like, put the pressure on you, especially when you looked at the market and realized Toronto was probably it. Like, there wasn't a bunch of teams clamoring for Pete Alonso. So I'm going to throw this back to you boys, okay? Because my thought is that if Pete is going to opt out, which I'm sure we watched Boras do this last year with Blake Snell, and it worked out. We watched Boras do this with Matt Chapman, and it worked out, right? Do you think there is a world where this works out for Pete Alonso, where he goes back to the open market next year after opting out and manages to get that, let's call it $120 million to kind of over the next 5 to really make it so like that offer he turned down for 6 years, 158, is at least he's getting that? Like, what needs to happen on the landscape?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. Obviously, Boras has convinced Pete Alonso that could still be on the table. I'm not as convinced, and I think some of the examples that you brought up, like somebody like a Matt Chapman, for instance, when Matt Chapman is hitting at just an adequate level, he's immediately one of the better players in baseball because that defense is it's locked down. It is totally locked down. And Pete Alonso just does not have that, right? Like Pete Alonso needs to, continue to be one of the best power hitters in the game. So I guess I'll put it this way. I think that he could get a contract like that if he hits 50 plus home runs this year. But it's got to be like, in my opinion, he has got to go above and beyond and probably be a, top 6 in MVP voting, like up there in RBIs type thing.
There are other things out of his control. There are other things out of his control too. Adam, how important and how tied to Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s market do you think Pete Alonso is going into next offseason? Obviously, Vladdy going to be the most sought after free agent, also a first baseman, 6 years younger.
Yeah. That's the big difference for me is, Scott, is like that Vladdy is so much younger. You actually brought it up a little bit earlier, Nick, where Vladdy's entering his prime and, Pete Alonso could be exiting his prime. However, like to Nick's point, if he puts up that monster season, I think absolutely people are going to go, okay, you just put up a monster season and you gave me like a 4 or a 5 WAR, right? Because, a lot of teams value Pete Alonso based on WAR. Last year he had a 2.6 WAR, according to Baseball Reference. Year before, 3.2. His only highest was 5.5 when he hit 50 home runs.
That was in his rookie year?
Back in his rookie year. But then again, that was him in his prime. So I think yes and no. He'll be tied into Vladdy because, I guess he's the next first baseman people are going to go after. So he'll kind of be the next domino. But no, because they're at different points in their career and they're going to be valued a lot differently.
So when it comes to negotiations, and this is going into our next topic perfectly here, because we did watch Pete lose out because he had no leverage. He was a really good example of how not to negotiate a big contract, if the truth be told. Toronto fans feel slighted. Listen, and I'm part of that. All right. So everyone, before we dive in and you hear what I'm about to say, I am not blaming the Toronto fans, but I will say that the Toronto fan base has become pretty obsessed with the fact that this is the team constantly being used for leverage and that we're being circled out of the group, right? Like we're being targeted by all these agents, and it's messing with Toronto.
Mm.
How much truth do you feel there is to that? And Nick, I'd love to hear your opinion on if maybe this is blowing a little out of proportion. And if you look across the sports landscape, let's broaden this a little bit. I mean, when it comes to free agency, every sport's a little different, but you're pinning teams against each other pretty regularly. Like if you're an agent, that's what you want to do probably. Do you think it's gotten out of hand with the Blue Jays, or do you think that just we're in it so much and it's happened so much recently that we feel like Toronto's being targeted?
Okay, so let me put it this way. It has gotten out of hand, but I still think it's a good thing. I actually think it's a good thing for it, and it is out of hand. And let me walk you through before you guys come back at me. Let me land this plane here. All right, Baltimore Orioles. I'm going to use them as an example right here. You rarely ever hear their name pop up when it comes to leverage or any, being involved in free agents, everything like that. They're a very good team. They have a very good foundation. They got a farm system that's great. They got a bunch of young talent right there. They got money for days. Why? Why are they not? Because they don't spend like we spend, right? We get brought up and we get put and lumped into these conversations all the time because there's an actual chance that Toronto will go out and get these free agents. So for everybody that's complaining about being used as leverage, I understand it is very frustrating coming in as a finalist time and time again. But what's even more depressing than that is never even being in the conversation to begin with. And there are 20 teams in the MLB that they wish they could be used as leverage. But it's like for that, if I hear the Miami Marlins are my competition, I don't what are they going to do? You know what I mean? It's like that's not going to happen, right? It needs to be a squad that's actually serious on the free agent market. The Toronto Blue Jays are one of them. So it's a double-edged sword. You're going to deal with the disappointment, but because we are in the mix, that's why I think it's still a good thing.
Yeah, and like I agree with you. Actually, I think there's no you got to shoot your shot. I mean, we all know the famous Wayne Gretzky. You got to just keep shooting your shots, and eventually you see what happens with the Toronto Blue Jays this offseason. They landed some guys.
Yeah, they did.
Shooting. And granted, it was the lower tier guys, but it doesn't matter. As long as you're in the mix there, if you want to be a big dog and win a World Series, you got to keep shooting your shot. And to the leverage thing on with the media and leaked information and stuff, I mean, we don't really know how much that actually plays a factor in the negotiation process. It really is. Is Steve Cohen going to go online and go read a tweet and go, wow, oh my God, he's going to the Jays. I better ramp up my offer now. Obviously it didn't happen.
Mock bomb dropped a big one right there.
Obviously it didn't happen because the offer actually got lower. You know what I mean? So how much does it actually play a factor? We will never know because we're not in the room. So I think people just want to believe whatever they want to believe. Yeah. And I think you're right. You're right, Scott. It is blown out of proportion just a little bit.
I do like what you just brought up about Alonso because there is a fine line between being used for leverage and then desperation. And I think that is what was happening with Pete Alonso because it felt like Boras was leaking shit constantly because he couldn't get any movement, right? So he's just like, oh, now a third team is interested. Turns out the Diamondbacks are sniffing around. And it's like, okay, that makes zero sense. It's just
the Angels in for $100 million.
That's right. Yeah.
It
really did feel like he had a fish out of water and he was just flopping around. So it is funny to see. And this is why fans cheer when Boras loses. Right?
Yes. Yeah, we're all kind of sick of Boras the last couple of years, guys? Honestly, like you brought up, we saw a thing that happened with Matt Chapman and Snell and Bellinger, and now you're seeing it with Bregman and Alonso. It's like he overvalues his guys to such an extent that he doesn't get those deals, and then he ends up getting them on these 1-year deals. Sometimes it works out, like you brought up with Blake Snell. But what if Pete Alonso doesn't hit 50 home runs, which we all can agree is that's very hard to do?
Mm-hmm.
What if he has another 35 homer season and a low 200 batting average?
It's in the exact same spot, just a year older.
What
he
if
takes his option?
He absolutely does. What if he hits 28 home runs?
He's done.
Yeah, I mean,
and he missed out on that 150 million he could have got.
You got to feel for him at that point, because then at that point, you really, I mean, listen, Pete Alonso is set for life and he's going to be fine, folks.
Yeah.
We don't need to cry over Pete Alonso here, but it is a lot of money to leave on the table, right? Like, let's be serious. When we're talking over $100 million, that's gotta just grind him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like that's like a little bit of a twist of the knife thing. I also think, I don't want to get too far off topic here, but this whole Pete Alonso, contract and everything that happened there, just another, I guess, reason for me to believe that the rookie contracts in MLB need to be changed. Just because, when you do look at the 6 years that he played with the New York Mets, like, that is quality baseball right there, quality hitting. And again, I know I don't want to cry over $54 million. Like, at the end of the day, this guy's made more money than I will ever dream of making in my life on this contract. But I do think that when you just, look pound for pound, across the fact that, there are other guys out there, Soto, for instance, they got 765 and everything like that. Like, the rookie contracts have got to be, something's got to change there.
What you brought up there, and we're not going to spend too much time on it here because we are kind of off the track, but the CBA, like, there's a lockout or strike coming, and it's going to be over free agency. It's going to be over players pushing for 1 year less of control from the club. It's going to come over an international free agent draft, right? Like, there's a lot of things that are lining up where it's not going to necessarily be the dollars and cents that create the labor strife between the MLB and the players, right? Like, there is some scary stuff coming, and I think free agency and fewer years of control is a big one that not many people are talking about, and we're gonna in 2026 see what a big deal it is. Anyways, we'll move on.
Yeah, but
move on.
Go ahead. Yeah, I'm done. I'll leave that for another podcast.
I know. We could talk this for quite
I
some
could go
time,
on forever about it.
But I'll tell you boys this. In a year, this might be all we're talking, so let's save it, right?
We'll save it for that. Yeah. When there's nothing else to talk about.
Nick, is this team done? And what do you feel like the landscape is if it is? Like, I think all three of us agree we want more done. I think another bat goes a long way, and maybe if they can get like a couple bullpen pieces where it's that we don't need high end guys, but let's bolster that depth a little bit. If that doesn't happen, where are you at with this team?
I think what was the number that we decided on at the bar? Was it 84, 85 wins?
85 wins. This is an 85 win team, we said. Yeah,
85 win team. And considering where we finished things off last year, I mean, I kind of take that, right? Because you get one or two good breakouts that you don't expect, and boom, there you are in the mix for that third wild card. Now, are they done for sure? I personally don't think so. Now, I know that there have been rumblings and reports that, offers are on the table for Alex Bregman, and we could sit here and talk about that for hours, but I'm gonna assume that he doesn't come here. I'm gonna assume that he goes to the Houston Astros or somewhere else. So let's just say that we don't get somebody of that. Bregman for 6 years.
Yeah, like it.
You know what?
I'm almost fine with him going to the Tigers for that.
Well, and listen, again, going off the track a bit right here, that is too long. And it again, if the numbers are what we think they are, being over $150 million, like, that is a lot of money for a guy who, could very easily age similarly to George Springer. And I don't know if anybody wants to do that again, especially if that contract would impact Guerrero's contract, which we don't know.
It would.
Anyways, you're right. That probably is too much. And I would be perfectly okay if he ended up going to the Astros or the Tigers.
No, obviously this team is better if they get Bregman. Like,
for
now, we're not saying that.
Yeah. Like I would I would like that deal a hell of a lot better if they also somehow magically had a great A+, offseason, and then also paired it up with a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. extension. Now we can look at this next like immediate window of like Santander, Vladdy, and Bregman. I'm like,
like
yeah, that's awesome.
2 to 3 years
2 to 3
of like
years.
we're amazing again.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. Exiting fantasy land, because that would be awesome. If I'm being really honest, I think that there is still at least 1 or 2 more moves to happen. I look at that bullpen and I think that, I mean, Brendan Little is the only lefty in there. I know that this was a big topic of conversation that we were having the other night, and like, if there is ever a moment in the game where you need to have a lefty, right, and you're in that bullpen, it is always going to be Brendan Little. The guy's arm is going to fall off, and we need to have more guys in there that are capable from throwing from that side. So I honestly see either a signing going down in that regard. I'm not familiar with who's on the free agency market left that is a lefty, or alternatively, I could see a trade happening with one of the many, infield, I say prospects, but infielders that we have right now. I'm thinking to myself, Leo Jimenez, Addison Barger, various other names like that. I could easily see one of them getting moved for a lefty in the pen.
Mason Fluharty is pretty much the only depth that this team has for a lefty in AAA. And lefty is such an important weapon to have, even if you're not using it, right? Like, there is something to be said for having a lefty in the pen. And the Blue Jays right now, they don't have a lefty as a starter, and they have, like you said, Brandon Little. And then in AAA, they have Mason Fluharty, who, by the way, is 23 years old. And you're really relying on hopefully ignorance that he doesn't know the spot he's in if he winds up in this, right? Like, imagine this team is competitive and they're hunting down that final wild card spot in August, and Brendan Little's arm has fallen off, and you're calling up a 23-year-old. Like, it just, I agree so much that a lefty should be a target, and I'm with you. I don't really know what's out there, and maybe a trade is the way to address this, but that's a really good point. In fact, I think they could survive not getting another bat. I know everyone listening right now, their buttholes just freaking tightened up a little bit, and now they're ready to comment, but I think we could survive without another bat, because I think there are, for the first time in a long time, some guys we could see take some real steps forward. Guys like Alan Roden, guys like Addison Barger. Like, there are options out there that maybe they do just finally hit, right? You can't just make a lefty out of thin air to come out of your pen. So that's a really good point. Adam, I was wondering if you're looking at guys to make internal steps forward, who do you have your eyes on?
I mean, there's a lot of guys, and I think my eyes will shift depending on who gets traded, because I do believe, kind of jumping off the last note and topic, was I think someone's gonna get shipped to move around, maybe get another lefty, maybe get another starting pitcher, or whoever, right? Just get some sort of depth somewhere else. I really am looking at, however, obviously Will Wagner's the big cop out, because he's really the only guy that I could see getting playing time right now. Because even when you look at the outfield, you've got Anthony Santander there. Dalton Varsho is going to fill in a spot. George Springer. And then I guess you have that DH spot, and you could maybe cycle in some of the older guys into that spot, like George Springer, Anthony Santander, get them off their feet. And then maybe cycle in like a guy like Addison Barger, Joey Loperfido. Who that's the thing. One of them can only have that spot. It's very tough for them to see a breakout if they're not getting any at bats. So that's where I lean on Will Wagner, because the most, I guess, volatile position for us is that third base bag, where Ernie Clement is currently holding down. It's like, okay, Will's played a little bit of third base. Maybe you have him splitting time with Ernie in that regard. But I think it's going to be really hard for us to see a breakout, like I mentioned, unless those guys get some playing time. But again, if I had to bet my life on it, I'd be like, okay, well, obviously it's Will Wagner, because he's the most clear and obvious guy. He had the best 80 plate appearance sample size, right? So, yeah, I'm looking at him. And then, of course, I'm looking at Aurelvis Martinez as maybe a dart throw option, because he is our top-rated guy. Yes, he had the PED thing,
Mhm.
and that's in the past, and he served his time. But he's like the really only guy in our farm system that has legit upside for serious power, which I
Mhm.
mean, if we're all looking at bats right now, we kind of needed a little bit more power because we were missing it. We were one of the worst teams in power last year. Maybe you see a reality where that guy gets some opportunities in DH spot or third base bag. We'll see what happens in spring training. But again, it's going to be probably August before we see these guys get full playing time and we see a breakout happen.
Speaking of breakouts, Scott, what are your thoughts on Yariel Rodriguez? Because I'm growing optimistic that we're gonna see a step up from him this coming year.
So I'm a big Yariel Rodriguez guy. I got to watch him pitch in Buffalo numerous times throughout the season last year when he was rehabbing from injury, and the guy is dominant. And being dominant against AAA guys is not the be all and end all. But he also struck out 12 of 15 guys that he faced, and not many dudes have the stuff to pull that off. I think he's got an opportunity here with Toronto to be a big K guy, and I think that we could really see him shift into a different animal this year in that kind of long man bullpen piece where he is for the first time since Ross Stripling, where the Blue Jays have that guy, right? Where they have a guy on the team in the bullpen who can eat some innings, who can come in and give you 3 if you need it. And if a guy gets injured, you can stretch him out over the next couple starts and he's making 5-inning starts, right? And this is incredibly valuable for any team to have. So I'm big on Yariel Rodriguez. I'm really curious about center field. And I know we touched on this too when we were drinking together on Wednesday. Because Varsho, there is no timeline as to when he's back. Everyone keeps saying this. He's probably going to miss the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
It does make me nervous not having a timeline as to when the best center fielder in baseball is going to be back patrolling that outfield. And guys like Adam, maybe step in here and give your opinion because not the greatest defensive outfield without him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
How
interesting.
do
I
they
like
limp through? How do they limp through? And is there maybe an opportunity there for a guy to get some playing time and run with it?
Well, here's a fun idea I know a lot of Blue Jay fans might like. What if you cash in on that $5 million you're paying Miles Straw this year and band-aid the crap out of that? Hey, listen, I was just thinking, like, who's our best defensive outfielder? Because if really that's what we're looking for, because that's all. Don Varsho has some upside, a little bit of pop with the bat, but like, if you just need some defense, Miles Straw. But however, you could go the other way and look at Jonathan Clase. That for me is the other kind of intriguing center field option. He actually is really up there in sprint speed.
Oh, he's incredibly fast.
He's incredible. So like maybe I'm not too familiar with his glove, but maybe you go run him out there and like give him a good, let's say it's a month, right? I'm gonna be crazy without Varsho for a month. Let's say it's a month. Hey, Jonathan, this is your time to prove you can go get at the big league level. And if you break out in some capacity, hey, you could stay a little longer. You found your way into the lineup. If you're playing some good defense and you have a little bit of bat, maybe you provide some stolen base opportunities. Hey, maybe you could play a little bit. But for me, honestly, it's intriguing the way that they'll go. Anyway, I don't know. What do you think, Scott? If you had to go between Miles Straw or a prospect for a month, who would you kind of go with?
I think I'm going to see how spring training goes. I think if Miles Straw can just be literally like a 80 OPS plus, just just if he's just 20% off of what like a average major league player is, I think his defense is going to be fine. But I will say this. Nathan Lucas is out of options. He's 31 years old. Nick, do you think he's the most apparent guy to kind of fill in and no one's talking about it? He can play all 3 outfield positions. He was a 300 hitter in AAA last year and honestly just keeps getting passed over because of his age. Maybe he is the safest bet.
So I actually have, as you guys were talking about that, I pulled up the Fangraphs Blue Jays roster, and they do currently have Nathan Lucas slotted in at that center field position. This is the opening day lineup for them. They're projecting it, and they have Dalton Varsho on the IL. Now they do also have Nathan Lucas with one option here. I don't know if
Oh,
that's
okay.
true or not. That's where they're at right now. But either way, I do think that he's going to be that nice little band-aid guy when you are dealing with, I think the injuries, and especially with Varsho and everything like that. As I was looking through this, though, not to completely pivot off of Nathan Lucas, I saw a very familiar name that everybody has just kind of thrown out at this point. Are we totally off the Davis Schneider train? Like, is the Babe Schneider stuff done now? Are we finished with that? Or are we thinking that he is like there is still something there?
So every level that Davis Schneider has made a jump up in, he has struggled in to begin with. This is the case with the Vancouver Canadians. This was the case with the New Hampshire Fisher Cats, and this was the case with the Buffalo Bisons. And the second season that he was with all of those teams, we saw big increases in his power and his offense, and it's because he's a guy who is good at adjusting. He's got a good freaking brain between the ears, and I don't want to write him off because he has managed to pull this off every time. He is only 26. I know that's not young or a spring chicken, but when you're looking at Blue Jays prospects, it's right in there, right? Like most of our guys that are on the verge are 26. I'm not off Davis Schneider. Listen, I don't want to see him be given the rope he was given in 2024. Like, I don't need to see 500 plate appearances from Davis Schneider hitting 199 and not hitting home runs. If you look at his stats last year, he didn't hit a home run for like what, 2.5 months? It was crazy.
Yeah.
So I personally think that spring training is huge for Davis Schneider in 2025. I think that more than any other point in his career, this moment right here is pivotal. And I think it's going to either make him or break him. This is his chance to either be that guy, the 26th man on a roster, show some power and hit some lefties, or it's probably back to AAA. And who knows? Maybe he's just Nathan Lucas at that point, and he just is that 4A dude who's grinding it out until he's 35, mostly in AAA.
This is an insane statistic right here, gentlemen. I was, again, just pulled up the baseball savant of Dave Schneider right here. And, sometimes when you look at, various guys and how they struggle, it's a multitude of things. It's tough to pinpoint exactly what it was. It is so abundantly clear when you are looking at Davis Schneider's sabermetrics and his baseball savant page right here. The four-seam fastball, the pitch that you are supposed to do the most damage on at the MLB level, everybody, he had a negative 15 run value and batted 126.
I know.
126 against the four-seam. Like, that's just... You can't play with that, right?
For me, the big question, like, we're talking about spring training and, who's going to break out and what do we need to see? For me, for David Schneider, it's never been more clear. If he can hit the upstairs fastball and he can prove that he can hit it out of the park, you got to spot again. That's literally that's the fix.
Your whole game.
That's
changes,
your whole game.
And
what we saw back in 2023 when he first came up, he could do that. And then he couldn't. So
I know you guys brought up something really interesting on Wednesday just about David Popkins, the new hitting coach, and his ability with the Twins in 2023 to really play the splits and to play lefty versus righty and keep the bench guys hot.
Mm-hmm.
If he can do that, Davis Schneider, there is a spot for him because his skill set does lend to splits.
Yeah, I mean, it's very simple. Oh, not very simple. Hitting's very complicated.
Yeah.
but
it's simple sitting here.
It's simple sitting here, and it sounds very simple. David Popkins is a very good shot. Look at the Twins' batting order. Not even their batting order, their bench, their roster. And you'll see guys, you're like, who's this guy? And why is he hitting 800? And why does he do it in 200 at-bats? Yeah. It's because David Popkins is able to give these guys a clear game plan every time. When you only have so many limited at-bats, there's only so many limited ways you can be attacked. And
Mhm.
for David Popkins, he works against that, where I'm assuming if you were to sit down with David Schneider, it's, dude, just sit on the upstairs fastball. And he's going to prep you to sit on the upstairs fastball, and you're going to have success because you're not going to get enough opportunities for them to counter, change, or adjust to you. You're just going to keep hitting the upstairs fastball and have success.
Anything else to add, gentlemen, on internal options for this team, or should we move on to the Ippei?
I think we could probably move on because, I mean,
Okay.
man, like, I think that's going to be a huge spring training conversation is
Yeah.
because there's so many guys. Like, there's so many guys in very similar roles. Even though our lineup looks like kind of weak, there's actually not a lot of holes for guys to really break into.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it was announced just 2 days ago that Ippei Mizuhara, of course, this is Shohei Ohtani's interpreter, was sentenced Thursday to nearly 5 years in prison for stealing about $17 million from
Wow.
the Los Angeles Dodgers now superstar Shohei Ohtani to repay gambling debts. So he actually has to pay Shohei back the 17 million, which is hilarious. I don't know how you go to jail for 56 months and then manage to have the money to do that. I know we were joking before we hit record and we were like, maybe he goes to Shohei and he's like, lend me 15 million. We'll turn it into 30, right?
So, listen, big Super Bowl game this Sunday, right? So, I mean, look, this is the time, right? There will be stuff to gamble on.
Although, will he be in prison by that time? I don't know.
Man, this has been such a crazy story, and we are going to dive a little bit more into gambling in general here. But when you hear the story, like, this has to be a biopic. Did you guys hear how Ippei was actually frauding Shohei?
So, are you talking about the phone calls?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I heard audio of one of the phone calls where he was trying to impersonate Shohei Ohtani, I believe it was his bank or something like that to get some big wire transfer. Wild stuff.
That was
Wild
actually
stuff.
big evidence that came out.
Listen, I know you're not supposed to use the word reverse racism. But
where are we going here, Scott? What's happening?
If there's even such a thing, it would be Ippei's little play here and using white people's internal stereotypes to scam $17 million, right? Like,
yeah. Oh, this guy sounds Japanese.
Yeah.
We'll give him $17 million.
Yeah.
It must be Ohtani.
It must be, yeah.
Oh God, that's good.
So, Nick, I'm wondering when you look at the gambling landscape in general, and you see how prevalent it's become, not just in baseball, but in sports in general. And I mean, let's face it, baseball has a history of gambling problems going back all the way to the Chicago White Sox back when they were the Black Sox and Shoeless Joe Jackson. And I mean,
Pete Rose.
Literally, there are plenty of examples within baseball. And it feels like there's just going to be more. Nick, would you agree with that? Like, it's tough to imagine, even with a 57-month sentence and needing to pay back 17 million. An addiction's an addiction, and people are not going to stop gambling because Ippei went to jail.
As long as there is money in the world, enough so that you can, fulfill your basic human needs, there will also be gambling. Right. And there's it's not like gambling is a new thing, even though we see every other commercial now when I watch sports is, another gambling thing. Right. Like, people have been gambling for thousands of years. Right. This is not new. So as long as you have, or people have, and even in Ippei's case, even if you don't have the money, right, there will still be gambling in some capacity. It's also, and again, I don't, I guess I'll play a tiny bit of devil's advocate here. For some of these, sports guys. Now, I'm not saying gamble at all on your sports. Like, you shouldn't, obviously. But I mean, think about the message that MLB or any of these other big sporting, moguls send. You walk into the stadium And there's, signs all over the goddamn place in the outfield, on the scoreboard of like, this gambling site, that gambling site. I turn on my television and Connor McDavid is telling me that I should be, betting over here. And then Wayne Gretzky is telling me another thing. It's very easy to see how this is happening. So to answer your question, it is certainly not going away anytime soon. I would anticipate that there will be, it'll probably quiet down for a couple months, and then there'll be another big scandal of some kind with some other big superstar that will suck. But that's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and like honestly, I look at it this way. I mean, let's be frank, gambling to some of these guys like Ippei, it's an addiction. If you're stealing $17 million from your closest friend to gamble, that's a problem, right? And I look at it this way as well. If you're a professional baseball player, like you accept the responsibility. I cannot gamble on baseball or really that many sports games at all. There's a gray area there. It's the same situation if I'm a truck driver. I can't drink alcohol while I'm driving my truck. As long sure, maybe I could do it on the outside of it, but as a baseball player, you have to accept that responsibility. But again, not every baseball player is going to accept it, or maybe they still have that need to want to gamble, or they'll try to find a way around him. There's always going to be a few people like that. And we saw that too in the whole Pat Hogan case as well.
I wonder, sorry, before you jump in, Scott, I do wonder how many players, how many umpires, how many, across all sports, how many of them actually do something that we will never know about, right? Because let's just say, for instance, this guy tells his buddy to bet on this thing through his account over. Like, I'm sure that has happened countless times, that we will never, ever be able to know about. I wonder how many of them out there are actually doing that.
And where it really gets scary is when you start looking at how much money is involved and the guys who need it. Right. So and I'm talking umpires here. I know Jesse Rogers of ESPN tweeted out a couple days ago, breaking per MLB, umpire Pat Hoberg has been fired for sharing betting accounts with a friend who bet on baseball. Though there is no evidence Hoberg himself bet on games or manipulated any that he worked on, he also deleted messages central to MLB's investigation. So if you're deleting all of the evidence, it does look pretty bad. But umpires are not making the millions of dollars that the players are, right? And so it is a very dangerous area where it really affects the integrity of the sport.
100%.
So I totally understand them firing him. Nick, do you feel that was the right move, even though there wasn't technically the evidence that he was guilty? Is that enough, just sharing betting sites?
Yeah, I mean, you got to set a hard line, right? Like
because they are his accounts.
That's the problem,
right?
There.
Like let's be honest here, right? It's just maybe it was just you were in the complete wrong place, wrong time. You did a dumb thing. You never bet on anything, whatever. But probably there was some involvement. Probably.
Oh, for
right.
Sure.
It's like it's your thing, dude. It's your account. Like you're linked to it, right? And you should know better,
baseball.
right? Yes. Like you should know better. Even if you never did it at all, you should know how this looks. And if you're the MLB, if you're any, one of these big sports leagues, you got to have that absolute hard line. We were talking about this on Wednesday as well. We were saying, well, a lot of times when you're dealing in social media in the world these days, it's like it's either black or it's white, and there is no gray area. And very rarely would I say that things should be black and just white. But this is one of those instances where, listen, if you're tied to any type of gambling thing at all, unless you're Shohei Ohtani, because you're the greatest player ever and we want to watch you forever. But if you're tied to any sort of gambling thing at all, sorry, dude, like you are getting a serious slap on the wrist, if not completely just getting, expelled from the sport, altogether.
And also I'll say this, like, okay, I don't know the situation, but it's your betting account and you're sharing it with a friend. Now I have betting accounts. I know you have betting accounts. I don't know if you have betting accounts, Scott. How many betting accounts are you sharing with a friend with your bank information on it?
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah,
That's just
Zero.
That's a weird thing.
Yeah, that
right?
for me, when I read that, I'm immediately calling bullshit.
Yeah.
And obviously, I don't know the situation. I don't know the guy. I don't know.
Mhm.
But that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Can you imagine? I share a betting account with you, Adam. I'm
Yeah.
like, why the hell are you putting all our money on the Arizona Cardinals right now, man?
$700,000 worth? Are you kidding me? No, that's not happening.
I don't trust this guy to bet my money. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like,
Man, I wonder if we can frame CB Buckner. I feel like I have access to his accounts. Can we start that rumor? Get that out there?
Yeah. Seriously, man.
All right, gentlemen. I know that you've got your own show to run here in about an hour. I really do appreciate you coming on, both Nick and Adam. You guys are a couple of my favorite content creators to just I listen. I know that sometimes you guys get flack for your thumbnails and shit like that, but you always have the sources. You've got the stuff to back it up. You're not constantly a speculative podcast, and honestly, I really do enjoy what you guys do. So well done, and thank you very much for joining.
well,
Thank you.
thanks for having us, man. This was a lot of fun. I'm surprised that I was like, whoa, we're done now.
Yeah.
Like that just flew by, dude. So
Yeah, it's always a great conversation with you, Scott. We always enjoy coming on and having you on our show as well.
Hey, and I always enjoy being on. What do you guys have coming up on Blue Jays today here? I know you got a couple interviews that you're excited about.
Yeah, I mean, we're really looking at spring training, honestly, right now. We're hoping, we're praying, we're crossing our fingers we can get down there right now. But honestly, just looking forward to the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. stuff and then the upcoming season, really transitioning, thank God, from the whole free agency stuff, because I'm ready to watch some baseball, Scott. I know you are too.
And if you are still watching at this point and you would like to see Scott engage in some type of weird baseball challenge, maybe it's a food related challenge, maybe it's we get on the field and we blindfold him and we make him do some weird shit on there. Comment down below that you want to see that, because that could also be on the docket for Blue Jays today in 2025.
That would be really fun, boys. Honestly, again, I love your show. Thanks for joining me. Take care, everybody, and we will see you Monday.